Jesus is not Caesar. He's the antithesis of Caesar. Caesar would have come in on a giant horse with flags and pomp and circumstance, of course. But here we see Jesus is coming and he's saying, my kingdom is not like that guy's kingdom. Well, hey, everybody, welcome into the Under God podcast. I am Pastor Nate, and I am normally joined by Pastor Stephen, who is the host of this podcast. But this week, I'm here solo doing something very special that I hope will be really meaningful for you, and that is a Holy Week journey. That's right. We're going to be dropping a new podcast every single day this week as we look more deeply and sort of put a telescope into the final week of the life of Jesus before he goes to the cross, of course, on Good Friday and walks out of the empty tomb on Sunday. So this is going to be an exciting special mini-series that we're doing here, and you're not going to want to miss a single day of that. Today, obviously, is Palm Sunday, and so we're releasing the first one, and I want to just start to get into this by talking to you about some of the things that happen that are interesting on Palm Sunday. Many of you probably went to a Palm Sunday service this morning, and you've already heard a little bit about this, but we want to just dive in a little bit deeper, share some insights, and help you to really get your hands around what's taking place as Jesus comes through the triumphal entry. And again, of course, we're going to look at every day this week, sort of what he did, what was going on in his life, the life of the disciples, the Pharisees, all the different players, and see how this week unfolds as Jesus heads towards the cross that, of course, he went to for you and for me. Now, let's get in. I'm going to bring a few different texts in today, but I want to start with Matthew chapter 21. We'll read the first 11 verses to sort of set the background for what we're going to be talking about here in this episode. Matthew 21, verse 1 through 11. Here's what it says. And when they drew near to Jerusalem and came to Bethphage at the Mount of Olives, then Jesus sent 2 disciples, saying to them, go into the village before you, and right away you'll find a donkey tied and a colt with her. Untie them and bring them to me. And if anyone says anything to you, you will say, the Lord needs them, and he will send them at once. Now this took place so that what was spoken through the prophet would be fulfilled, saying, say to the daughter of Zion, behold, your king is coming to you, humble and mounted on a donkey, and on a colt, the foal of a pack animal. So the disciples went and did just as Jesus had directed them, and brought the donkey and the colt, and put their cloaks on them, and he sat on them. And a very large crowd spread their cloaks on the road, and others were cutting branches from the trees and spreading them on the road. And the crowds who went ahead of him and the ones who followed were there shouting and saying, Hosanna to the Son of David. Blessed is the one who comes in the name of the Lord. Hosanna in the highest heavens. And when he entered into Jerusalem, the whole city was stirred up, saying, who is this? And the crowds were saying, this is the prophet Jesus of Nazareth from Galilee. Now, this is the scene that's going on. And to kind of set the scene, you have to understand that Palm Sunday begins not at the temple, but out on the road. And this is a deliberate journey that Jesus is taking from the Mount of Olives into Jerusalem, right? And this is a week of Passover. And so what happens at Passover is that the Jewish people from all over the region would gather there in Jerusalem. So you have kind of like a tripled population. Think about when an American city hosts a Super Bowl or something along those lines. You're going to have a lot more people descend on that city, and it is mass chaos. There's extra food, there's extra parties, there's extra crime, there's extra everything. That's sort of what Jerusalem is like at this point in time. A tripled population, maybe even quadrupled from normal as all these people arrive. Now, at this point in Jesus' life, he's 3 years into his ministry, and he's pretty well known at this point for miracles and for other teachings that he's been doing around the city, and the crowds are stirred up. They would have just recently seen or heard about him raising Lazarus from the dead. And so, of course, you can imagine when someone who's a prophet or a rabbi raises someone from the dead, that starts to spread around like wildfire. And some people now sensing and seeing how powerful Jesus really is, they're starting to expect a revolution. And others are hoping for healing, and all of them are waiting, and they are excited, right? So now, I want to zoom in here for a second and talk about this donkey, because this happened for a specific reason. You know, Jesus, he could have looked for a horse, couldn't find a Tesla, but maybe there's something else he could ride. The reason that he chose a colt and a donkey here and not a war horse, which would have been a striking image, is actually to fulfill a prophecy that Zechariah had prophesied many, many years, of course, before. And let's take a look at that. In Zechariah 9:9, it says this: "Rejoice greatly, O daughter of Zion. Shout aloud, O daughter of Jerusalem. Look, your king comes to you. He is righteous and victorious, humble and riding on a donkey, and on a male donkey, the foal of a female donkey." Now, this donkey became a royal mount for peace. This donkey Jesus gets on is sending a clear message. He's on purpose, trying to be different, trying to do something different. Jesus is not Caesar. He's the antithesis of Caesar. Caesar would have come in on a giant horse with flags and pomp and circumstance, of course. But here we see Jesus is coming and he's saying, my kingdom is not like that guy's kingdom. I'm not going to do things the way that he did things. I'm not here to conquer Rome. I'm here to conquer and defeat sin and death. This is what Jesus is doing and why he's doing things the way he is doing it. And when we think about the supernatural worldview of the Bible, this really becomes even more, because what we have here is really a cosmic declaration of kingship from Jesus, a cosmic declaration of kingship. When Jesus enters the city, he's not just making a scene. He's not just going, oh, well, this is nice. Everyone wants to shout Hosanna and kind of sing at me and throw palm branches at me. No. He's actually entering into conflict with the spiritual powers of darkness, with corrupt religious systems, with corrupt politicians and political empires. And don't forget, as we talked about a few episodes back, he's coming to deal with a cosmic rebellion. These divine beings that fell, that rebelled against Yahweh, that came and said, we're going to come and make man in our image, all of that. Jesus is now the answer. All the way back to Genesis, when it said that the seed of the woman and the seed of the serpent would have this conflict, right? We see this unfolding throughout all the Old Testament, but now this is coming to a head with Jesus. And this donkey is not a sign of weakness. Some people will say, well, this is a sign of humility that he would put himself on a donkey. I mean, perhaps it was. But what we know it was is a direct subversion of worldly power. No powerful worldly leader was going to put themselves on a donkey, on a colt, and kind of bebop their way through the city. No, they would have come in on a war horse, the biggest one they could find, right? And so Jesus is doing this, and he's saying to all the people around, he's saying, hey, look at this. I want you to know something. I am a king, but I might not be the king that you expected. He's telegraphing so much here in the fact that he chooses to fulfill prophecy, get on this donkey, and be nothing like Caesar, nothing like any of the people of power in his day. Now, let's talk about the crowd and the cry of the crowd. Matthew 21, again, verse 9, it said, Hosanna, Son of David, blessed or blessed, as some people read that, is he who comes in the name of the Lord. But this is actually a quote from another scripture. Jesus, he knows the Bible. He knows the Bible really, really well. And so he's actually quoting from Psalm 118. And this is a cry of deliverance. This is actually part of the Hallel Psalms that are sung during Passover, which is what this season is. So he's doing so much here. He's got this happening. And so these people are now fulfilling another messianic prophecy, again, from Psalm 119. Hosanna, save us now. It's a cry for deliverance and a cry of royal acclamation. And Jesus is right in the middle of all of it. But again, the crowd misunderstands. So as he's hearing these crowds cry out, Hosanna, Son of David, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord, they're thinking one thing, and he is fully understanding something else. Again, he knows his Bible, so he knows that when he hears this being said, it's being said about him. But again, they want something really specific. What these people want is salvation from Roman oppression. And Jesus is coming for something very different. Something perhaps less obvious if you're not paying attention, but something far more oppressive than the oppression that the Romans could ever conjure up. He's coming to deal with the oppression of sin. He's coming to deal with the oppression of sin. They're looking for a crown. His eyes are set on a cross. Now, here's a question for you. How often do we, like this crowd, sort of celebrate Jesus when he fits into our agenda? When he's coming to do the things that we want him to do. Hey, go and fight my battles. Go and get that victory for me. And when we understand that Jesus is someone who fights battles and who gains victory, it's easy for us to take our fights, to take our battles and go, you should be fighting those for me. But the truth of the matter is, when we do that, we are far more like the crowd than we are like the man who hung on a cross that we say we're here to follow. So something to think about, something to think about. Do we want that Jesus, the one who went to the cross for us, or do we want the one that all those people wanted that turned out to be not the Jesus they were looking for, right? Now, in the midst of all of this, we then have the Pharisees, and they're hanging out. They're watching all of this. Man, what's going on? This guy, he's been a troublemaker, for 3 years now. He's contradicting them, and he's clarifying, and he's teaching them, and he's telling them, man, you don't understand you know the letter of the law, but you don't understand the spirit of the law. And he's been doing miracles, which they've told him stop doing. There's all this stuff. And now they want to come and try to stop him again. How many know when you're doing things for God, people who are about themselves will come and try to tell you to stop? And so we see this happen. I read from Matthew earlier, but this account of Jesus coming in, this triumphal entry into Jerusalem, is actually recorded in all 4 Gospels. So I'm going to go now to Luke. We'll look at a few things from Luke. But in Luke 19, 39 and 40, it says this, and some of the Pharisees from the crowd said to him, "Teacher, rebuke your disciples." And here's his reply to him. I love this so much. First of all, he didn't say, "I don't have to do what you say." He didn't say, "No, I'm not doing that," which probably would have been my response. "Who are you? I'm not doing that." He answered them, and he says something, and it's an ultimate power move from the one who has ultimate power. He says, "Let me tell you something. If you try to keep these silent, you see all these stones around here? These stones will start to cry out. They will begin to praise me if the people do not." And in this, he is giving them a glimpse into the kind of authority that he actually walks in, that he actually holds. He sees this glimpse into this spiritual convergence, a moment where heaven and earth start to align, right? And he's saying, I need you guys to understand something. I'm not just a teacher. I'm not just someone who does some miracles of people. I'm actually the Lord of creation. And if people all choose to not praise me, or if you choose to shut them up, creation that I made, remember John 1, all things were made through him. He's saying all these rocks that I created, well, they're going to shout out and praise for me. So how far do you want to take this? How far do you want to go in trying to shut people up and silence them from praising me? Even if you could succeed in making all these people shut their mouths and stop praising me, the rocks that you're standing on would cry out in their place. This is such a powerful moment where Jesus comes and just splits their heads. What is happening? Their minds are blown. How could this guy even make a claim that rocks would praise him? And this is an important point to remember for you and for me, because it is true that Jesus is our personal Savior. That's 100% true. But Jesus is so much more than that. He's not just our personal Savior. He is the Lord of creation. He's the Lord of creation. And his kingship over creation, it demands a response, even if it has to come from a pile of rocks, because people choose to refuse to give it. Powerful moment here that happens on this Palm Sunday. Next, we move into this scene where we see Jesus weeping over Jerusalem. And I'm going to stay in Luke's account for this and read in Luke 19:42. He says this, "If you had only known today what peace would bring, but now it's been hidden from your eyes." He's weeping. He's crying out, "Jerusalem, Jerusalem, if you had only known what peace would bring." Now he knows what's coming. And he also knows that 40 years later, the Romans will destroy the temple. And he also knows that right now, all of these people who are hoping that he's going to be this political king, this political ruler that's going to overthrow the Caesar and overthrow the empire and change everything politically, he knows that none of that's going to actually happen. And in fact, these Romans that they're thinking he's going to defeat are going to destroy their temple. He knows that their outward worship of him really is masking an inward rebellion, and that the palm branches, and all the praises, they're not going to last. When he goes to this cross just a few days later, he knows that most of these people who are praising him today will then abandon him later. Remember, this is the same guy who said, "Woe to you who the others speak well of." In other words, when people speak good about you, when they're praising you like this, don't let that define who you are. The praise he's looking for, the praise we should be looking for, is the praise of our Father who's in heaven, who sees all and knows all. Now, there's something else to notice about this, though. When Jesus goes, and the Bible tells us that he weeps and laments over Jerusalem, this is also in keeping with the idea that he is the great high priest and he is the great high prophet. So this moment where you see him doing this, he's weeping over the city, it mirrors the grieving heart of God, which is frequently expressed through the prophets in the Old Testament. It brings to mind people like Hosea and Jeremiah and Isaiah, who are literally weeping over Jerusalem. They're carrying the heart of God and prophetically weeping over Jerusalem, weeping over the people of God, weeping over the people of Israel, and they're expressing this divine disturbance in the grieving heart of God. Jesus is doing this too because he's come through this great moment, but he realizes and he sees they don't get it. They don't get it. And this should tell us something, because I think many times, Christian, you and me, we can come into a church service where there's a lot of pomp and circumstance, and there's a lot of great music, and there's a lot of, all kinds of things. Some churches have lights and all loud sound and good looking people on the stage playing music. I mean, it can really start to feel like a party scene. And here's the thing, you can enter into an environment like that. You can experience all of that. And most people are expressing something that is genuine from their heart. They don't want rocks to cry out on their place. They want to cry out on their own and give Jesus the worship that he is due. But did you know that you can actually be a part of that? And if your heart is not in the right place, you're not a part of that. You can be a part of a moment and not be a part of the family of God. And this is what Jesus recognizes is happening with all of these people. They're a part of a moment, but they are not part of what God is doing. They don't understand his plans. They don't see what he is doing. And so he comes, he sees all of that, and his response is to weep and to lament over Jerusalem. Jesus has come to offer peace, but they reject it because they want war. They want war. They want him to triumph over the Romans. And really, this is an expression of great divine love. It's not manipulative. Jesus isn't weeping to manipulate. These are not fake crocodile tears that he is crying to try and manipulate people. He's crying before his Father. And he's saying, man, if only they had known, if only they understood. It's not manipulative. It's not detached. What you're seeing here is a holy sorrow from a holy God over lost opportunities for people that he loves very much. Now, before I wrap this episode, I want to just also share with you a couple of things that the early church, in the first couple hundred years of the church, what they thought about Palm Sunday. Many of the early fathers in their writings actually show that they viewed Palm Sunday as the beginning of a holy conflict, a confrontation, again, between the true king of the universe and corrupt kingdoms of the world. And this is happening. Jesus would ultimately defeat Rome. And he will ultimately defeat all powers. There will be a day where every knee bows and every tongue confesses. So the political rulership is coming. It's just not here yet. But they understood it as the beginning of that. See, the people who were there celebrating in that moment, they thought, well, this is happening now. Like, we're in this right now. He's overturning everything. Of course, a couple hundred years later, when we look back, and even the early church fathers start to look, they go, well, that didn't happen then, but he was starting that. He was starting that. But they also see that he came, and though he is this ultimate dichotomy juxtaposition within himself, he has all the power, and yet he does walk in total humility even to the point that he would take himself and allow himself to be put on a Roman cross. And so early liturgies began to commemorate this with processions and reading of the Psalms and a focus on Jesus's humility as an example for our lives. And I got to tell you, humility and confidence are not in conflict. But humility and hubris are. Jesus had all the confidence in the world, but he walked in no hubris. There was no guile in him. There was no deceit in him. There was no false sense of authority. There was only true authority. And when you have true spiritual authority, you don't need to try to convince people of it. You just exist in it. And it comes from within you. It comes from within the God within you. Now, for the early church, Palm Sunday really wasn't about pageantry and all of the things that we sometimes see now, but it was actually about preparation. There's a king who's coming, and he's headed for the cross. And as we get into this Palm Sunday today, and we start to walk through Holy Week, I want you to do your best to put your mind and your heart in a place of trying to walk through these incidences, not knowing the outcome. Of course, we know the outcome. We all know that Sunday is coming. But I want you to try to think, do the mental discipline to think about what it would be like to exist in this space, to see these things unfolding, not knowing fully even what's going to happen on Friday, and definitely not knowing what's going to happen on Sunday. And the question is, in this moment for you, when you look at this kind of king, what kind of king are you expecting? As you walk through this Holy Week, what kind of God are you expecting? Are you expecting a God who's going to solve all your problems today? Who's going to deal with all your enemies today? Who's going to deal with all your debts today? Are you looking for a king who wants to help you overcome the sin that so easily entangles us? Who wants to break the grip on the things that hold us, that keep us in bondage? The king who wants to bring you freedom of heart. Are you ready to cry, Hosanna, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord? Not because he's going to meet every practical need you have today, but because he is coming to set you free. That's the question. That's the question we have to wrestle with as we walk through this week. What kind of king do we want? As we see what they wanted, it might mirror something in our own heart. And I want to implore you and encourage you, get acquainted with the real Jesus, the real mission of Jesus, as we walk through this Holy Week together. And I guarantee you, by next Sunday, you're going to see him in a new light. Thanks so much for joining us. Be sure and tune in tomorrow for our next episode.
Thank you so much for joining us today on the Under God podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to like and leave us a review. Your support helps us reach more people with our content. You can stay connected with us on True Social, Facebook, Instagram, and Getter. And don't forget to subscribe on Rumble, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and Spotify so you never miss an episode. You can also access show notes and other resources on our website at undergodpodcast.com. See you next time, and remember to think biblically about the things that matter most.